Dirt roads to rock crawling, two-buck chuck to screaming eagle, moonshine to 50-year-old single malt. We talk about it all here on Wheelin' Wine and Whiskey with your hosts, Jason and Chris.
Welcome to Wheelin' Wine and Whiskey, episode 163, here on a remote, on Riverside.
Woo-hoo.
Studio R, we're going to call this.
Studio R.
Chris Maines in the studio this evening. How are you, Chris?
I'm great. Well,
Well, no, you're not great. You got issues. You got old man issues.
I got old man issues. You know, this is 3 weeks ago I had an ear infection and I went away with antibiotics. Then I got COVID, got through that, still alive, and now I've got a freaking ear infection again. So, same ear. It's almost like it didn't go away. Back on antibiotics, off the booze. Actually, I haven't had any alcohol in almost 2 weeks. So,
okay, well, there's your first problem. Second problem is, you need to get some Vagisil.
Right.
Too. So maybe that'll help.
Let me hit the Vagisil button. Oh, wait a minute, that's out in the garage. Never mind. So
there you are.
I'm not great, but I'm on the mend again. So how you doing?
Okay. Well, I'm doing better than you, apparently. I've had a heck of a last couple weeks, but we're surviving. So here we are.
Sir.
And we reached out to a friend of ours, and he's been on the podcast in the past.
Yes, he has.
And but we want to get his story directly.
Right.
You know? So got a lot of stories to tell. A lot of recoveries to tell. One very major recovery here that we're going to get into here in a second.
Right.
But crew chief for the Bomber Slauson crew at the Hammers, he has a lot of racing experience and know-how in the Ultra 4 arena. And none other than Nick Bailey is here with us tonight. Nick, how the hell are you?
Hey man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and glad we could get this thing together finally.
I wish I was there in person in Lake Tahoe this weekend,
July 4th
but
weekend Tahoe is a shit
could
show.
have just hitchhiked.
We should have. We should have. Yeah, totally.
Really
Welcome to the show.
We could have taken the Gomez chopper up to you guys there, because I'm sure they're there in South Shore this weekend partying on their boat.
Maybe the bears will get
Probably
scared
so.
away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So, right on, man. Well, hey, yeah, this is awesome. This has been a long time coming. We've talked about this, and it's like, we got this remote Riverside podcasting technology going for us right now that's pretty damn good.
Is.
So,
Sure.
Yeah, so we thought, okay, this will be good. Chris is still recovering from COVID and earache and torn labia and all this stuff.
Man,
so this
really?
will
Let
be
me check
good.
that.
So Nick.
Off air.
You know who does all the editing? It's going to suddenly
Exactly,
become Jason's torn
exactly.
labia,
Yeah, right. No, I still four wheel.
Oh.
So, anyways, but okay. So, Nick, let's just dive right into it. So you've got a recovery, off-road recovery business, Avalanche Technical, right? So I've seen on IG, I've talked to you about some of your recoveries of, recovering snowmobiles and side-by-sides and, quads, whatever. So
Sure,
talk about
yeah.
your background there and what you kind of do on the side there.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's a part of what I do. So I started my own company, Avalanche Technical Services, back in 2017, right at the beginning of the year, and it started as just sort of a project consulting, engineering consulting business that was just me, and I've always been into off-road. Used to race motocross on an ATV for about 8 years growing up. And then went out to school in Colorado, went to Colorado State in Fort Collins, and less racing was going on out there. So I kept it up for a while, and then I realized that I couldn't do that and finish a degree at school, so I had to kind of tone down on the racing thing. So for me personally, on a four-wheeler, that all ended about 2005. Got into the utility ATVs. About that time, they were coming out with some stuff that was still pretty sporty, pretty fun, but it was four-wheel drive, and it could, you could go out and run trails. And
right.
So I got into that, rode in the mountains, had ATVs, dirt bikes, and all sorts of different four-wheel drive junk, during college. $500 truck, $700 truck, stuff like that.
Okay.
So that was kind of my background. And then through college, worked in a couple different industries, oil and gas, did a bunch of engine automation work on gas compressors that took me all over the country, 38 states and 3 different countries in the world, including Indonesia. So I worked on the road all over the place for 5 or 6 years. And that being a remote job allowed me to settle in Tahoe.
Wow.
Which was great. My wife got a job at the college here in town, and she was the pioneer. She moved us out. We got settled in, and I figured eventually I'd come up with something where I didn't have to be on the road all the time.
Okay.
And because I'm sure there's a lot of guys that, listen, and folks that listen that have lived that life, and the money's great, and the experience is, just.
And that's what I was going to say. I mean, seeing all those areas and stuff, most people never get that opportunity, right? So,
sure.
I mean, that just adds to living and real life experiences in different parts of the world is invaluable. I mean, it just to see how other people live, how other things work, and stuff. I mean, that's super cool.
Yeah, it certainly helps you sort out, where you want to live and where you don't.
Right.
That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah,
a lot of people would say you live in God's country right there. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, I put in my time, and some jobs were 3 weeks, and, that was great because you were in the armpit of America. I won't name any names, but they're out there. And, and then some, I had a couple long-term jobs where I was in on the East Coast in Maryland for over a year. On one big giant compressor station overhaul job where everything from the foundations that these big engines sit on all the way to brand new high pressure fuel injection controls and turbocharger upgrades. And our business unit did all of it. And I probably had 250 or 300 people at the peak that were working under me as a site supervisor on that job.
Okay.
So it was a big deal, and it was a lot of fun, and just, man, you learned a ton. So that experience was fantastic. And I had applied for a job in Tahoe with Vail, actually.
Oh.
Avid skier that you are.
Yeah.
The evil empire. But
the evil empire, the corporate America.
Yeah, they're the largest kind of white-collar employer in the area, and I thought that might be a good opportunity to not have to be on the road. And lucky for me, the HR, someone in the HR department at the time saw my resume, grabbed it, took it home, and shared it with some folks in town that had a general engineering company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was hired by a family business up here and did a bunch of project management consulting on general engineering projects from 2016 through 2021.
Okay.
So for 5 years of that experience here in Tahoe, water lines, infrastructure. We did all sorts of cool projects up here. And they were just thrilled because they were like, hey, we have somebody in Tahoe that has done these big technical projects. So the owner of that company, awesome guy, and he talked me into starting my own business. And so once I went down that path, I was like, I could I could really try to make this broad and encompass some other stuff that I enjoy to do, right? That I'm passionate about.
Sure.
So why not? Everyone always talks about the golden opportunity to mix those things, right? And be able to do what you love. So that's what I did. So the recovery aspect of the business just kind of started on the side. It was never my bread and butter, and today it's still not. But I just try to focus on the real hard, bizarre stuff that comes up every once in a while. And it works out great in today's world because you've got all these, volunteer recovery groups that are great, right? There's tons of guys that have a Jeep or a Toyota or whatever, and they love to be out wheeling. And if the thrill is always in the chase, right? So if you've got a reason to have to go out and accomplish a goal, it just makes the whole trip that much better.
It's a perfect storm. I mean, you've got a lot of people with capable rigs, but then you've got a lot of newbies buying these Rubicons and whatnot that are set up to be badass right off the showroom floor. And then these newbies go out and they realize, well, maybe the rig's badass, but maybe I'm in over my head, and they call for help. And who are you going to call?
Sure. And there's a real big difference there. And as wheelers and, lifetime or long-time wheelers like you guys, I assume.
I don't know about Chris, but me.
All this experience. Yeah. Well, when you get into this when you're young, and anybody that's lifelong, and Randy's a great example, right? You start with just junk because you have no money, and you're just scrapping, and you're putting stuff together, and you have to find a way to make it work. And it's no frills, right? I mean, it's open diffs and small tires, and like the Toyota I had in high school, and you're getting stuck all the time, and there's always a limit. I mean, I think back to those days, if you just had maybe $500, the improvements that you could make, and knowing to air down, like, dude, I could have been the hero.
Air down
of
for
high school,
what?
Like unbelievable. Buy an air compressor, let some air out of your tires, and like you'll have twice the truck. I had no idea, right? You go out and do all this stuff, and it's funny looking back. If you could go and just be that little bird on your shoulder and give some advice, it'd go a long way.
Well, and to that point, Nick, is starting out from those meager beginnings, it forces you to learn how to wheel because you don't have lockers. You don't have this, set up two buggy on 43 stickies that you could just Stevie Wonder could drive right through any trail.
Sure.
So it's great to grow up that way and not only learn how to four wheel, learn your rig, learn what works, what doesn't work out on the trail. And I mean, those are those valuable experiences that you just can't teach in a book or a podcast or anything like that. I mean, it's just stuff that you need to go live and be out in the trail and physically do.
It's absolutely true. And you guys, I'm sure, have seen it in industry. There's no replacement for experience.
Oh, absolutely not.
Anybody, you could have the top of the line tools and all the right equipment, everything that you should have. But to have somebody that has been around the block and has seen, some different circumstances, it's just, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It just makes a world of difference.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I've seen it, yes. I mean, these people that have more dollars and cents, and they go out and buy this ridiculously set up rig that we would all kill for, and they it gets through the trail, but they're doing it clumsy and just no finesse because they have no experience. They never learned how to four wheel.
What's the impact of that?
And pick a line.
What's the impact of that? The impact of that is extreme wear and tear on the trails. And I mean, I get out on the trail just for an example to go to Blue Lakes Trail. Seeing how torn up that trail was a couple of years ago, I'm like, holy crap! I remember driving that trail on 31s. And it was challenging, but it was doable. You can't do that trail on 31s anymore. I mean, I think even 35s is stretching it. So there's some areas that are rutted out. Yeah. And I was riding with Jason in his CJ5 that trip on 38s, and I'm like, shit, this trail is messed up. But it's all these yahoos with their big tires, and hey, I'm a little stuck, so I'll just mash the pedal and throttle out.
Yeah, just a little skinny pedal.
So the obvious caveat is Slauson in the Tacoma.
Right. Stock mobbing.
Stock mobbing, absolutely.
Stock mobbing.
Yeah, but no, you're right. So anyway, we got a little off track, but so all the experience, all those years, I figured if I could join those things together, I would. And then living here and being fortunate to be here in Lake Tahoe and have the Rubicon Trail right across the way, I started seeing. It really started in the winter with snowmobiles and like you alluded to earlier, not a lot of good options, right? I started crossing paths with folks that were in search and rescue. And obviously, if you get out in the mountains and you have an issue, they will go and get you if they can find you. Mm-hmm. But there's no regard for your machine. Obviously, that doesn't matter, assuming there's not some giant environmental concern. That machine's going to stay all year and they're going to get you home, and that's it. So I thought, man, if there was a way to kind of focus on comes down to like what is the really difficult recoveries or that requires special equipment, that'd be awesome for me, because I enjoy every aspect of, just all terrains, any day, anytime, that sort of, that challenge. And so it kind of started on that path. I had, some of the utility ATVs. There had been a big progression in like the track kits. Nowadays, there's lots of folks that have, either razors or whatever, and they run the tracks from Camzo and other manufacturers. But back in 2016, 2017, I mean, it was hard to find anything like that. None of the search and rescue teams had them. You know, they were just barely breaking out, and the systems weren't great. Even on this Glacier Girl recovery, the owner of the Jeep and myself both had tracked ATVs. We'd never met before the event happened, but come to find out, once we got together and started talking about a plan, he had a comparable ATV to mine and a comparable set of tracks.
Wow.
And we started going out and looking for the Jeep right after Hammers. So, and that was 2017. So you're talking the 10 days into February, something like that, is when we started the search. So that story now is a little out of order.
So we need to get into that. But before that,
Sure.
So one other thought I wanted to say was, being where you're at in a vacation town, a resort town, you got all these people coming up to recreate, whether it be skiing, snowmobiling, whatever it is in the winter, and then of course all the summer activities that's going on now. But these these snowmobiles, I mean, awesome tool, awesome technology, but anybody could walk in from the street, buy a snowmobile that's way more capable than they are to go out into the backcountry, and it's no joke up there. The Sierras are no freaking joke, especially in the winter. Summer's bad enough if you break down and you're full drive or something. And it's like, okay. But winter, it's no joke. You're not hiking out if you get 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 miles in on a trail, right? So you talk about that search and rescue aspect, and then okay,
Avalanche
now
risks,
I got this. Yeah, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 snowmobile, whatever it is that you got out there, tracked rig. You're going out there and recovering these rigs for these guys, or they break or whatever. It may not be a lost situation, but the Sierras are no freaking joke for people that aren't familiar with California Sierras.
Right. Any mountain range is no joke. Whether the Rockies,
some intense
Sierras,
terrain. Yeah.
Yes, but here's the deal, and it ties into what Jason's talking about. So I lived in Colorado for 10 years before I wound up here in Tahoe. And if you living in northern Colorado, as in Fort Collins, if you go basically, I'll call it 8 hours in any direction, you're still in a place that gets snow, and people are still familiar with the challenges and stuff, right? And you come out here to the Sierra, you've got a spot that gets way more snow, like Jason's saying, has some gnarly terrain, and you could grow up an hour from here and have never seen snow before.
Exactly.
So it creates a very interesting, and I started getting these. It's funny how you come to realize stuff like this, but we moved, and our homeowner's insurance went way down, even though the house was worth more. I was like, man, that's surprising. Well, come to find out, Tahoe Douglas Fire here has a phenomenal record or rating for fire protection. Okay. And so my homeowner's insurance was cheaper, but my car insurance was way more expensive. Oh, wow. I was like, why is that? And it's exactly what I just said. So you've got exposure from folks that potentially have no skills in the snow, experience, all that
I've got four-wheel drive. I can go as fast as I want.
Yeah.
Laws of physics still apply, people.
And brakes work great in the snow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
So that creates, an interesting dynamic here, specifically in this area. Being a tourist area alone is one thing, but having that just location and being so close to so many places that don't experience any of the climatic conditions. I grew up in Southern California, and it was 70 degrees every day. You could see the ocean from the ranch I grew up on. And you never had to be, I could go to school every day. I never had to bring a jacket. I didn't have to think about bringing a sweatshirt. I mean, and I have a bunch of friends, in my circle, this is the SoCal Wuss Bag is the title, and it's not a blanket thing, but anybody that just lives in an environment where there really are no challenges ever.
Right.
And it's amazing how much different the mentality is. When you leave the house out here one day and you're not prepared, and you might not come.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
We've seen it all up there. You've seen it all, I'm sure. I mean, last year's with the Caldor fire, and obviously all that. That was a real scary deal for the people of the South Shore and and the evacuations that were going on. So that's a whole nother scenario. Of course, you got a winter snow situation, you got summertime storms. I mean, I've almost died on Lake Tahoe when I was a teenager in the middle of the summer on a little sunfish sailboat. I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen out there. The winds can shift, and if the winds come out of the east on when you're on the lake on Lake Tahoe,
it can turn into an ocean.
It can get scary, and people don't realize the mountains are nothing to be trifled with. That's for sure, whether it's summer or winter.
Yeah, and you've got about a 10-degree variance in water temperature year round.
Exactly.
So from the hottest, right? So and
coolest,
especially, excuse me. So especially out in the middle of the lake, if you're just driving in a boat or whatever, you're going to see in September, 65 degrees is about as hot as it's going to get. And then in the dead of winter, it's 55, and that's it. That's the range that you have. So people,
but the air temperature will vary. You'll have a 40 or 50 degree air temperature change during the day.
Absolutely,
totally. Yep.
From 30 in the morning till 80 in the afternoon. It's like, okay, welcome to the Sierras. But okay, so back to Avalanche Technical. So you started this business, you saw a need, and so you got that going. So talk about a couple of your recovery rigs. You talk about tracks. We've seen pictures of it on IG.
Sure.
Definitely got to check that out if you guys aren't following Nick on Avalanche Technical on the IG. Go look at that. And so talk about some of your recovery rigs.
Yeah, so it kind of started. Like I was saying, it kind of started on the snowmobile avenue at first, because that was where the biggest need that I could see existed. In general, especially around here, you've got, folks with trail sleds, but man, there are a lot of young, guys that ride dirt bikes in the summertime, and they've got badass, at this time, about 5 years ago, all the aftermarket turbo kits, and I mean, insane machines that can go anywhere, like you said, but not the best, reliability, at least when they were getting started, in a lot of those aftermarket kits. So you go out and blow stuff up, and you're accessing this terrain that nothing else but a helicopter is going to get there. You know what I mean? And so you'd start seeing these stories or hearing stories. And so at the time I had just a Kawasaki Brute Force, so a 750cc V-twin, four-wheel drive, independent suspension, pretty much a top of the line, Japanese ATV. They're all very similar. And I got a set of Camzo 4-season tracks for it. So it's a snow track, but it's full bogey wheels. So there's no high facts like a typical snowmobile would have.
No cooling issue. You don't need snow to cool it down. Yes, you don't need snow to cool the track, and obviously the ATV has a radiator, so it's good regardless of whatever conditions you're driving on. The engine's cool. The tracks are fully supported on bearings or bushings, so there's no concern with if you've got to get on a dirt road or asphalt or even rocks and snow. So, starting things out and not having a ton of money, that made perfect sense. 4-season tracks. So I still have a variant of that machine now. It's just a newer version, newer set of tracks. And it's the first one that gets tracked up in the fall, and in fact, it's still on tracks right now. Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's the last one to change out in the summertime. So that machine has done, still to this day, probably the most recoveries, and it's been anything from snowmobiles, snow bikes. There's another one.
Yeah, snow bikes.
A lot of guys, they start with a motocross bike that is used to running really great for a 30-minute moto, and then one more 30-minute moto, and then it goes to the shop and it gets worked on and it gets prepped. You take a poor motocross bike and you strap 250-pound timber sled conversion to it, and then you take it up in the mountains where the air's thin and the temperature extremes are all over the place. The cylinder can be packed in ice. I mean, gosh, I've dealt with a lot of snow bikes.
And not to mention the horsepower it takes to turn a track in snow, especially the Sierra cement that we typically get up there. That's a very wet, heavy snow, and it takes some serious horsepower. So it's putting so much load on those smaller bikes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a newer technology that has improved a lot also in the last few years. But same thing, when this got started 5 years ago, my goodness, I would see stuff online all the time. It was just like, the bike blew up or it stopped charging and there's no power.
Shit broke.
I mean, they can do amazing things in their wheelhouse, right? They have strengths that are completely different than a snowmobile or an ATV like my setup. Totally. Side hilling.
They're so easy to side hill. It's a joke. It's
cheating.
Yeah, it's so cheating. Cheating. People get on a snowmobile, and then it's like, if you can side hill, you got some skills, right?
Sure.
But you get on a snow bike, and it's like, oh, side hill, okay, where I can go in this canyon, no problem. And it's like, oh, you guys don't even know what it's like on a snowmobile, especially an old snowmobile. But yeah,
Sure.
Anyways.
Yeah, so that pretty much summarizes the brute force, and it's an awesome machine. It's the most powerful of the four, kind of original Japanese manufacturers: Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, and Kawasaki. It's like the best engine. It's got a full front differential lock with a lever, old school, super reliable. Very important with the tracks. I mean, there's lots of situations. You have tons of traction, so everything. There's a lot more stress put on all the different, posi and Visco lock, Can-Am diffs, all the different things that are, the manufacturers try to come up with to make that front end work correctly. Kawasaki's got an old school little momentary lever that you pull in. And in my experience, nothing beats it. It's phenomenal with the tracks.
Right
you just keep a little hair tie from your wife or girlfriend on the bars. You can slide it over if you need to lock it, and works great.
That's great.
So that's the old
That's the workhorse.
Been around forever. Works great. I can take it just about anywhere. It won't really get into an environment that'll get it stuck. The only time I've had one of my, because I've owned now 3, never at one time, but just upgrade, keep them fresh. So the only time I've ever had one stuck was in 2017 in my front yard. I just went over the snowplow berm and just completely buried it in powder that was probably 6 or 7 feet deep.
Wow.
There you go.
So it's never left me stranded. No mechanicals.
Wow.
Solid, ultra
Better
solid.
start knocking on some wood right now.
That's impressive. Yeah, I'm knocking on wood for you right now.
Got it.
And then you got a Toyota.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All the horsepower.
Sorry, I got maybe some COVID from Chris.
Toy COVID.
Yeah. Well, see, all that reliability talk that I just was sharing about the Kawasaki and all that carries over to these the old rice burners. And
there you go.
The Toyota, man, let me tell you, that thing has been an absolute champ as well. So yes, I have the chassis is a 90 4Runner. Looks like one of the biggest pile of crap Toyotas that even Jason has ever seen. Multicolored, just beat. And some guy built it in Colorado probably 10 years or so ago and had a good amount of money and did everything right. And then it was owned by a younger kid, I think, that had a lot of fun with it and didn't do much from a maintenance standpoint. Poor thing was just tortured. But it's
change the oil. What are you talking
set up
about?
perfectly.
That's crazy talk.
Hey, man, I'll tell you, I think I've done it once. I've owned that thing for 4 years. I think I've changed oil once or twice. And every time I check it, it looks good and it's still there.
Send it.
So it's a 90 chassis. It's got a 3.4, a Marlin dual ultimate case setup, 4.7's rear case, ARVs front and rear, chromoly axle shafts. It's a workhorse. So it does great. So a lot of my parts running and in the summertime, whether it's on a trail or in the winter, that thing has easily 20, 30, 40, like full blown, off-road recoveries under its belt, aside from just Good Samaritan driving through Tahoe, pulling people out all the time. So it's a battle axe. It's hard to beat. Also hasn't left me stranded. I remember one time I went out in the Nevada desert boondocking with Randy one time, and I was like, man, I've got a leak in the rear diff. I'm not sure what the problem is. It's just I got to bring some gear oil with me and just keep it full. And Randy's like, well, you're never worried until it stops leaking.
That's right.
That's when it's out, And
sweat.
So about
horsepower.
halfway through, about 200 desert miles, I was under there, and he's like, well, are the third member bolts tight? And I was like, I don't know. I put a wrench on them. They were loose. Tighten them. No more leaks.
Wow.
No way. How funny.
Yeah, just the most basic, so easy that it should have been the first thing.
Right,
I picked, obviously. And it was just like, man, it's like a gasket or, the guy used RTV and he should, whatever. It was
right.
fine. Tighten it up. No
Nut and bolt your rigs, people.
And you have, You have tracks for that bad boy too, right?
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
got,
So that's like the newest. So we've gone from like the oldest, most reliable piece of equipment I've ever had with the Kawasaki and the Camzo tracks. And yes, this last season, I've been on the fence and thought about trying to find a cat, a small snow cat.
Okay.
I did a bunch of research, and I kind of had a budget, like everybody, I hope, and looked and weighing all the options and storage and what I would do in the summertime with this thing. And I was like, okay, so I could probably spend 25 or 30 grand and try to find a cat. So I started looking, and just like everything else in the world right now, right, from a value standpoint, it didn't get you very far.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd wind up buying this old piece of crap with a carburetor and just junky.
Put another 30 grand into it.
Yeah, exactly. Not very reliable. And, it might be great in the snow, but who knows? There were a whole bunch of other challenges that came with it. So I started doing research on track conversion since I had so much success with the quads. And I found Ruby Tracks, which is actually out of East Coast of Canada. The guy that owns it, his name is Scott Profit. And I was pinging different people. I talked to American Truck Track in Michigan and some others. Matt Tracks is out there, but they don't really build something that I was interested in. Most of their stuff seems to have more of an industrial application. And for the snow that we had, like big snow in the mountains, it's not even really on their radar, as strange as that sounds.
Wow.
You start getting deep into this stuff, and it's a whole different world when you're talking backcountry versus just snow, right? There's majority of this country that gets snow when it falls, it's flat.
Right.
And getting through it is one thing, but being able to get up in the mountains and in some technical spots is a different story. So this guy was super cool. I had all the experience with the ATVs and seen all kinds of issues, like on the Glacier Girl recovery. We proofed a lot of different stuff out with ATV tracks. I was breaking things and sending pictures to ATVtracks.net is like the biggest distributor. A guy named Gary, they're out of Spokane, Washington. He's a buddy of mine, has been great over the years, helped me out with parts and tracks. And when something would happen, I'd like send a picture and be like, hey, here's the deal. We were driving, dropped in, track did this thing broke. I've got it welded back together because I need to go in next weekend, but and they've made improvements.
Oh, that's good.
Fantastic. So they're a vendor. They carry other brands, but Camzo tracks are what I run. And the cool thing is, if I get a new set every 2 years, there's always something that's different. They don't rest on their laurels. So they make some incredible products.
That's good.
Staying cutting edge.
Yeah,
that's cool
so
that they're taking feedback too.
Absolutely, right. A smart company would, but many of them don't. So it's really refreshing to see such a thing. So this guy, Scott, that owns Ruby Tracks in Canada, he took everything that I had to say. And, if it wasn't something that he heard before, he was into researching it and trying to figure it out. I was even able to make some custom requests. And so he built a set of tracks that went for my 4Runner that were like the belt length was a standard, but he did some other customization for me that other people wouldn't even talk to me about. And so that's a fantastic company, and they build an awesome product. If you've got anybody that, is interested in doing such a thing for a Jeep, we can talk about that too.
There you go.
But yeah, so Ruby Tracks, they're on Instagram. I've got pictures of my rig and they're tagged in it. But that's an awesome company as well. And the 4Runner, I only got to run it twice. It took a while, supply chain issues these days are real bad. So by the time I got the tracks, it was April of this year. I got one good recovery and then one good scouting trip opening the Rubicon here at the beginning of the season with those tracks. And so far, so good. They've done they've been very impressive.
So there you go. This is a good lead into Rubicon and the highly publicized, acclaimed, creme de la creme recovery of Glacier Girl.
Glacier Girl.
Sure.
Let's get into that, and you can dispel a lot of the, from fact and fiction of what actually went down with this, and good old internet and the internet keyboard warriors that are like, oh, this is stupid, and you should have done this, and that guy should have left that, whatever. It's like, no, here's what really happened, and here's how we recovered this thing. So Let's get into that juice.
Yeah, take it from the top. Huh?
Yeah.
How did it get there in the first place?
How did it get there?
Yeah, well, that's pretty much
way
where
back in 1842.
That's right. See, the Rubicon, so to speak.
I was driving a shit box, and this is how it happened.
So, you guys have both been on the Rubicon, and you're relatively local to this area. And Jason, I know you're an avid skier, so you're coming up to the mountains regardless, right? Whether you want to go skiing or snowmobiling. So, if you remember that very very interesting year, 2017.
Yes.
So the winter obviously would have been 16-17. And leading into that winter, all through New Year's Day, if we had had any snow in Tahoe, you probably could have counted the flakes. I mean, it was dry.
Wow.
And that pattern has happened a lot since I've lived here, where, winters just start late. So we have a really great kind of local summer that will go through September, October. It might get a little cold around Halloween.
The fourth summer.
Yeah, right. It's on that chart you've seen online.
Yeah.
Exactly. So just nothing, man. All through Christmas, no white Christmas, just a horrible, dry-looking winter, and everyone was dreading it. 14 was bad, 15 was bad, and 16 started really bad. And so there was a gentleman and his son that had decided they were going to – they had a place in Squaw Valley, like a ski condo or whatever, made their main residence down in the Bay Area. But they'd spent a lot of time in Squaw, and the skiing wasn't great. But because it wasn't great, there wasn't a lot of snow, and they were like, hey, man, the Rubicon, it's 30 minutes down the road. Why don't we run in? So father had a K30 Chev, and the son had the XJ, the famous white XJ that I would imagine by this point most folks have probably seen a picture of time or two. So they decided they were going to make a little run-in on the trail. So 2 guys, 2 rigs, drove in. Just past Miller Lake is Miller Meadow. And so you're seeing, like if you're on the trail today, you've seen the lake, and then you kind of go through the trees and you pop out again, and there's the meadow with the river running through it, right? Well, on the western end of that, there's a really small little creek crossing. It doesn't look like anything. You wouldn't even bat an eye this time of year driving through there. It's just a very small, compared to all the other water crossing, it's one of the smaller ones. So that spot had water, and it had frozen. I mean, it was cold. There just wasn't a lot of snow. So it had frozen and thawed and frozen. So they were driving in from the Tahoe trailhead together. So the dad went through in the truck, the son followed in the Jeep, and every time it's just breaking pieces of ice, right? And they got in a little farther, kind of got into some snow, and they de-beaded a tire on the truck, on that K30. So they had a spare, and they put it on, pushed on a little bit farther, and they lost another one. Oh. And now they don't have a spare, and the tire's completely off the rim. So that truck was on 16.5s, and if you're a tire guy, you know that all those odd, like commercial half sizes don't have the bead retention that all the standard wheels do. So that inner, bead ridge that kind of locks the tire on all your normal, even car and truck, light truck tires is not as pronounced on the commercial tires because they're always running high pressure and, you're going down the highway. It's all about longevity and efficiency and stuff. So 16.5s, bad deal, unless you're bead locked. Like you buy those Hummer surplus ones with double bead locks, that's one way to do it. They didn't have them. Lost the second tire. They put the 2 bad tires on the Cherokee, and they were going to drive into Tahoe City or somewhere up there where there's a tire shop. So started heading in, made it to town, got the tires reseated, drove back into the Rubicon, heading to the K30, so now they've gone through this creek crossing like 4 times, right? They both went through on the way in.
Ice is broken up.
Yes. The Jeep went through on the way out. The Jeep went through on the way in. It starts to snow. And this is now New Year's Day of 2017. So they've
retro raggy.
Yeah. So they're like, man, we've had a fun day. This tire thing happened. And now, of course, it's starting to snow. So it's going to be good skiing when we get back to Squaw, but we don't really need this right now. So they decided they're not going to push it. They did not make it back to the truck. They turned around and decided they were going to head out. And now we're looking at the 5th time they're going to drive through this icy creek crossing.
Sure.
Well, on that 5th pass, as they're trying to leave, there were several chunks, maybe 3x3, 4x4 that are all floating. And it just so happened that like 3 or 4 of these things got stacked up and it high centered the Cherokee in the middle of the creek crossing.
Wow.
And they were just turtled, right? It may have had a locker in the back. It didn't have a winch. So they called a buddy. They had a Garmin inReach, one of the first guys to have it, back 5-6 years ago. And they asked for help. A buddy in town could see their location. He hopped in a rig that he had, tried to drive in. And by this point, man, it's starting to rip. It is just dumping snow. And he's like, well, I think they're close right around the corner, but I think I'm going to get stuck. So I'm not going to go any farther. And this guy, the friend of theirs, turned around and he didn't even see them. They wound up walking. Luckily for them, it's only, maybe 4.5 miles from there to the Tahoe side staging area. So they got picked up at the staging area and got back, to regroup. Well, it didn't stop snowing from that day for probably like 7 or 8 days. And I'm talking day and night.
Yeah.
Day and night snowing. Wow. So
puking.
They got it. Yeah. And so this guy was not, as far as like us, and in today's world, it's hard to even compare because there's a Facebook group for everything. The forums were still kind of a deal back then. Okay. They were just kind of petering out. So he asked a few people, asked around. He got on Reno 4x4 and Pirate 4x4 and asked for help. They got a group, maybe 3 or 4 rigs together, what would have been the next weekend, 4 or 5 days later. And I don't think they made it to the staging area, just nuked snow for 7 days. And as it can do in Tahoe, you're talking, there was probably 10 or 12 feet at that point. So they didn't get close. The guy, the owner, the father, the son goes back to college or whatever. It was Christmas break. So he's out of the picture. The father is semi-retired at this point. So he stays in squad. He's going to figure out how they're going to get their vehicles out.
Get this.
So about this time, so I had, my career deal, I had taken the Tahoe job, so I was local. I wasn't on the road. And I read about it on Reno 4x4. And I reached out to the owner. And I said, hey, man, this sounds really interesting. Like, this is one of the reasons I moved to Tahoe, to get involved in something like this.
This sounds like fun.
Yes, absolutely. And I was like, you know what? I've got an ATV with tracks. It's not a snowmobile. It's not as good as a snowmobile in the mountains. But we're talking about a trail, the Rubicon Trail. It's pretty mellow as far as grades and everything go. It will get technical in the wintertime. But you don't have to climb any giant mountain peaks or anything. You're just, you're running a road. Right. So I said, it'd be a good machine to get in there and try to at least locate the Jeep, check it out. If you guys left anything in it, we can kind of secure it and all that stuff. He said, hey, nice to meet you, Nick. That sounds great. I actually have an ATV with tracks as well. Sounds like a good time. He said, I haven't used the thing much. I haven't ridden it a whole lot, but it sounds like a great opportunity to get out and use it some more. So we met up that first day, and he's to this day a great friend of mine. And I reached out to him and one of the other guys just before this show, and I said, "Hey, man, is there anything? What is your most fond memory of this whole experience that you want to make sure I cover?" Well, the owner's response was, "The first time I met Sick Nick, it was just incredible. I had him riding through stuff that he just could not even imagine." And he said that was just a life-changing moment, getting on that ATV and following me into the spot where we knew the Jeep was stuck.
Okay.
We didn't even make it. I don't think we even made it halfway. So on top of all the snow, all through that winter, we got a bunch of rain, right? We had those atmospheric river storms that it had snowed a bunch, but then it would rain inches. I remember I was at Hammers, and after coming back through Randy's in Gardnerville, we've got to cut across from 395 over to Kingsbury to come up here to Tahoe. And there were road closures because it was all flooded. I mean, it was just a freaking mess. I had shoveled snow off the roof of my house before I left. And when I got back, there was 7 or 8 feet of snow on the roof.
Man.
And then you get 4 inches of rain on that snow, and it holds it like a sponge. Right. So you've got the weight now of 13, 14 feet of snow. I mean, it was just an absolute mess. So, so they had all the snow and then all the rain. So as we're driving in the Rubicon, even that very first, little hard bottom concrete creek crossing, right? You leave the Tahoe side staging area. There's a little bit of an incline. You kind of cut up. Up to your right is open, right? There's not many trees. It's like a little shelf road. You get on top, and then there's a creek crossing. So that right there, we were driving on 14 or 15 feet of snow, and on the trail, straight cliff, 14 or 15 feet down, running exposed water, and then straight cliff, 14 or 15 feet back up on the other side. So I have some pictures. So he, along with his quote, he sent me a picture, and I don't even remember taking it, but it's of him on his ATV. We had to go off the trail to the left into the trees where the sun, wasn't hitting that crossing, and there was a snow bridge. And I told the guy, I said, "Hey man, if we can walk across this, our quads are lighter on their tracks, ground pressure wise, than we are on our feet.
Sure.
So I'm going to hold your winch line and I'm going to walk across this. And if I make it, we'll be able to ride over it."
Okay.
And he was just like astounded, like, oh my God, we've got crazy. Rushing creek, 14 feet down. If you fall through, I mean, you're
done.
Yeah. What are you going to do? How are you going to get out of that?
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy. And, but we made it through there, another few miles. And I mean, there were tank traps like that the whole way. You talk about like a dynamic technical environment. I mean, the trail in certain sections has water running on it, and anywhere there was water running was, dirt and rocks, and everywhere else was 15 or 16 feet of snow. It was nuts.
So that's a great point, and what people don't realize, that are running these trails in the summer, and it's like a flat, mundane road,
right?
But because of the way the snow falls, the wind drifts. And then, of course, water flowing underneath, like you say, with the rainstorms in between. And, yeah, you get – tank trap is an exact great very descriptive of what it is, because I have seen it firsthand, four-wheeling, snowmobiling, in a snowcat in the Sierras. And it's like, oh, this road's a piece of cake. We're going to be able to get to XYZ in half an hour. No,
sure.
It's obstacle after
Famous
obstacle to
words.
get there because of it's insane. But okay, so go on. I just wanted to reiterate that a normal road in the summertime is not a normal road in the wintertime.
No,
I
it's
don't
a
care
completely different
what
animal.
vehicle you're
Yeah.
in. Yeah,
Sure. Yeah. So on those, if the folks listening have seen those track conversion kits, they're from the side, they're triangular, right? Because you've got a drive sprocket that takes the place of your tire and wheel. And then below that, you have a longer frame that is supporting the track and distributing your weight. You never want to invert the way that a tire is round and spins around. That track, you need to drive the track and you need to allow that track to follow the terrain, but it can never invert, right? Because if it inverts, it gets into your footwell and your fenders, and you don't want to spin the whole assembly.
Right.
That's right. We were inverted.
we're inverted.
In fact, I was inverted, about a mile after that big creek crossing. So after dealing with so many of these transitions that were just very abrupt, from the factory, it's an anti-rotation bracket, they call it.
Okay.
So however your machine is set up, there's a bracket that either grabs. We were both riding independent, suspended, full A-arm machines. So there's a bracket that bolts to the A-arm, and it holds a rod that is spring-loaded. And so it'll allow movement to follow terrain, but it keeps the entire assembly from trying to spin.
Gotcha.
And I broke a bracket because we just kept coming, where I would be dropping straight down and hitting basically rocks, And we shoveled some of them, but there were so many of them, and I thought I could get away with one that I was not able to get away with. And I broke a bracket, and this is probably after 3 or 4 hours of this guy riding stuff that he never thought he'd be riding. And so we decided to pack it in. That was the first time we had met, the first time we had tried to go for the Jeep. So we got on the trail, we got out.
And he thinks you're effing crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw what we were dealing with and how things were going to be. But we didn't even make it halfway in on that first day.
And you do. So again, back to my point, it's like wintertime, it's like you can't just hike out because you're going to post hole left and right, especially in those conditions, unless you got snowshoes. And even then you're not making great time. So any time that I've been out in the backcountry in the wintertime, it's like you got to have a turnaround time, right? where
Sure.
it allows you a few hours to get back to civilization. If everything goes okay, right? So it's survival out there. You don't want to spend the night out in the snow in the wilderness Sierras there. In the winter.
You got to be prepared too. I mean, make sure you bring survival equipment, food,
fire starter.
Fire starter.
Yeah, so that's a good segue, Chris. Just real quick to interject, what are some of the safety gear that you carry, Nick? I mean, I'm assuming you got a backpack with some survival gear, some Cliff Bars, and a fire starter, and maybe a flask of bourbon or something. Or
yeah, right. I carry the little barrel.
Well, there you go, like the Saint Bernard.
There you go.
Kind of like a Saint Bernard,
just like the Saint Bernard in Bugs Bunny cartoons, where he mixes up a martini. Yeah.
Oh man. So and that's obviously evolved over the years. But yeah, like back in those times, 5 years ago, the way that it all started, a lot of the basics that you just covered, a really small first aid kit, a Mylar blanket, fire starters, I've always got a radio. I'm a ham operator. So I've got ham repeaters, search and rescue frequencies, all that sort of thing. At the time, I probably didn't own an InReach. I think it was the owner of the vehicle there that kind of turned me on to that. So I got one afterwards, but for those first few trips, I did not have one.
Are you doing satellite phone
InReach,
or anything?
Yeah, sat phone or?
Yeah, so the InReach just is it's a communication device. It's not a phone.
By Garmin, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it will allow, and it was actually a DeLorme originally, if you remember that company.
Oh, yeah.
And then Garmin, being the larger company, acquired them and brought. It was a DeLorme InReach, and now it's a Garmin InReach, and they have 3 or 4 different models. So I've had them all. But yeah, so it allows two-way communication. I can also put, a tracking mode on.
Popcorn
Earlier,
trail.
Chris and I were discussing like a hiker on the PCT trail that has his data is on Facebook for the whole family and all the friends they can follow. That's exactly, I'm assuming, what he's using, right? So you can turn that on. It will drop breadcrumbs. You can share your link, or you can post it to Facebook, and then anybody that's friends with you on Facebook can check it out. Super cool, right? I've got friends all over the world. Something happens to me in the middle of the night. My wife might be asleep, but my buddy James in Adelaide, Australia, might just be starting his day, and he's like, "Dude,
the Aussies are sipping their coffee, going, oh shit, Nick's in trouble."
Let me jump on an airplane.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's awesome technology. So I have one now, and that goes with me all the time. I clip it. A lot of times I wear overalls or bibs, and I clip it on real close where I can pretty much get to it no matter what situation or circumstance I'm in.
Right on. So that's one
no
device.
sat phone, though.
You don't carry a sat phone?
Yeah, so I do not carry a sat phone. I've never had an issue with the InReach in the situations I've been in. I think if I had, a particular job where I knew that I was going to be out for a long period of time in an environment where that was the only option, I would probably add redundancy with something like a sat phone.
Okay.
I've used them, racing internationally, like in Mexico. And but for what I do right now, man, the InReach does a great job, and it's super reasonable. Mine is active all the time, year round. I have one of the monthly plans, and I get 20 messages and unlimited tracking, and I use it all the time, and they're fantastic.
Cool. They are a great system. I know Spot was part of that deal for a while, or in that market, and they still are, but it seems like the Garmin InReach now is the thing to have. I've heard it over and over again of how many people like those. So that's good real world experience there.
Yeah, and I literally have used mine all over the world, and it does what it's supposed to do.
Right on.
It's a great unit. So
go to Nick's Garmin InReach Amazon link.
All right, affiliate program.
Yeah, affiliate link.
So you ultimately did recover, or were part of the team that recovered that vehicle, correct?
Glacier Girl.
Oh,
yeah, so let's get back to that. We got a little sidetracked, but it was a good point because of the recovery gear. I just wanted to hear about safety stuff that
absolutely.
you would carry. So, okay, back to Glacier Girl.
Yeah, so, there were probably, with the owner and I, there were probably 3 or 4 trips before really anybody else got involved.
Wow.
And it was basically because we had those two machines, very comparable. It was the perfect machine to access the Rubicon Trail that year based on all the conditions. I've actually never owned a snowmobile. I've ridden them a couple times,
Wow.
right? I've done rentals and stuff like that. I've never owned one. The couple times that I've ridden one, in the mountains, in the snow, hard to beat. I mean, There's no other thing that is traveling on the snow surface that is going to go the places that a modern high-performance snowmobile is going to go. They're in a league of their own. However, on a trail, like we were talking about before, when you start adding in all those tank traps and needing to have, the capacity to either haul additional people or gear or be able to pull on something, the ATVs do a great job.
Superior, yes.
Yeah, in my opinion. I mean, and I've been doing
for
this.
sure. I mean, a snowmobile, any capable snowmobile is a one-person rig, and you get out there, and I mean, they're a blast. But you're not riding doubles. You're not carrying a lot of gear. There's a small little pack on the front and the back if you got all that stuff, but you're not carrying anything worthwhile. And then, like you say, the newer sleds are longer, and you get into those tank traps. It's a whole different world right there too. Just to get you can bury one of those things in a hot second. Something with 4 tracks, 4-wheel, drive, you can motor over some incredible terrain in the winter.
When you're powering everything that's touching the ground,
yes,
it's a big advantage.
Instead of just one big track.
Because if you're in a bad situation and recovery is involved or whatever, there's going to be a lot of starting and stopping. And, any avid snowmobiler can tell you that can be one of the most challenging things on a sled, right? Once you're moving, it's all good.
There's so many war stories of any new, I love it, new to snowmobiling, and just, you're going to get stuck. You're going to bury the sled, and that's, 260, 80 pound sled that you're trying to get unstuck and powder. Oh man, it's a workout.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of you augered in. You said you take an hour to dig out or whatever.
Well, not quite an hour, but it's unless we stop for maybe a beverage and some beef jerky or something. But it's taxing. It's totally it's cool. It's fun, but
the fact that the owner and I, we had those machines and we hit it off. I mean, like I said earlier, to this day, we're still really good friends. Wound up being all these other connections. The longer that we knew each other and chatted, there were links all the way across. He and my father are both KU, Kansas alums. They had gone to Kansas about 10 years apart. They were in the same college. The owner had done industrial design. My dad had done graphic design. I mean, we've since gone to like basketball tournament games together. I mean, it's super.
Is that Lawrence, Kansas?
Yeah.
Yes, KU, Lawrence, Kansas. That's correct.
That's
the current national champion. Yeah.
Rodney went there too.
And that's where the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America's headquarters is. So I've been there. Stayed in that haunted hotel downtown and. Hung out in some bars and whatnot. Yeah, it's a cool town.
It is. It's very cool, especially for Kansas. It's got some terrain. Right?
Not a lot.
Those rock chalk bluffs, man.
Rock chalk.
Yep.
So you guys did a lot of scouting, and my understanding of the story is like they had GPS where the XJ was, correct?
Dropped a pin.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Perfect transition point. So by the time, I told you we had taken 2 or 3 trips on the quads, we had been to and over the spot several times. We were using an Avalanche probe that obviously, Jason, you're familiar with, but if the listeners aren't, the easiest way to think about it is a collapsible tent pole, right? That everybody's used, a fiberglass pole with the aluminum fittings, and it's got the elastic in it. So an Avalanche probe is very similar. It has to be portable because it's on a skier's back or a snowmobiler's back. And if there's a situation where somebody in your party's been buried by an avalanche, you can deploy it, tighten it up, pull the string tight, and now you've got a long rod that you can probe an avalanche debris field with and hopefully try to find your buddy before it's too late. So we had an avalanche probe, and we were on the spot, right? There's always some variability in the GPS locations, but he's looking around and he says, "Yeah, I think this is it." And we never hit anything. We'd send that probe down everywhere that we thought that the Jeep would be, and we're not talking about a body; we're talking about
metal,
a Jeep,
metal,
Right.
So,
It's a pretty large item.
When we hit,
Yeah.
and it's 6 feet tall, and it's 18 feet long, and it's 6 feet
Right.
wide, and so
and
we were gonna
it's
hit
sitting,
Yeah.
level, so there's a lot of surface area there.
Absolutely. Should be a drop in the bucket. Could not find it. And we wound up going past it, just past that spot on the trail. I know I described it earlier, where that little after Miller Meadow, and there's a very small creek crossing. One of the next features that you would see in the summertime, there's a concrete water crossing and almost like a big settling pond that is on the uphill side, the north side of the trail at that spot. That is about 150 yards past where the Jeep was stuck. So that area in 2017, now we're higher up on the trail. Probably without exaggeration, we're talking like a 20-foot snowbank transition to open water pond.
Holy crap.
I mean, just an absolutely insurmountable obstacle. But it was also something that looked very similar, and it was fresh in the owner's mind, like, hey, I know we weren't this far, right? So once we got there, we could turn back around. We wound up digging a trench across the trail that was probably 3 or 4 feet deep, and then walking through the trench and probing.
Oh my gosh! Just to get
Didn't hit
deeper into the snowpack.
Wow.
Nothing. Still nothing.
No. So that next week we had a brief reprieve in the what is now that famous 16-17 winter, and because the owner was retired, he would go out like midweek while I was doing the desk job, right? That general engineering job I told you about earlier.
Sure.
And I get a photograph one, random day in late April. I get a photograph.
April.
And he's standing in the hole with a smile. It's like a selfie, right? So he's in the hole.
Yeah.
Smiling,
I got it.
and he's holding the camera way up high so I could see his entire body, right? And at the bottom of the hole that he's standing in, there's just like this little black semicircle, maybe, a 5-inch disc. Well, that was one of his truck's spare tires on the roof rack of the Jeep. So he had got a strike, he had dug down, and he had uncovered this tiny corner of the tire on the roof rack.
Oh my gosh.
But he knew that he had
How
found
many
it.
feet down?
Okay.
So he was probably, he's a tall guy. He's probably 6'3", 6'4". And I would say the tire, so he's standing in a trench, and the tire was probably, so the trench was probably 6 feet deep, and the tire's probably 3 to 4 feet below him.
Wow.
And so this is after a lot of time.
So we're talking 10 feet.
Earlier.
So what's our time frame now from when you guys first went out to that selfie pic?
Right. So we started searching after hammers in 2017. So we're talking like February 10th.
So
right.
mid-February.
Fast forward.
Couple months.
Yes. So when he sent me
Valentine's
that
Day.
picture, right. When he sent me that picture when I was at work was probably, I'm going to say it was April 25th.
So
And
that's
what I
3
mean.
months.
I mean, there were 4 or 5 trips.
February, March,
there were 4 or
April,
5 trips
3 months.
of nothing.
Wow.
So it was incredible. And he knew at that point, right? So the way that snowpack works, right, for people that aren't familiar, as it turns into spring, it will just condense and condense and condense.
It just gets
so
hard.
What had been 15 feet where we were losing that probe, turned into 8 to 10 feet,
It
let's
gets,
say.
it gets denser and harder is what happens.
Absolutely. 8 to 10 feet over the top of a lifted Cherokee on 35.
Wow.
On April 25th.
Man.
Right.
I can't imagine, sitting there, and I think, you're very similar to me. It's like you're a problem solver, and you're like, okay, we got an idea of where this thing's at, and then you finally found out where it's at, and then it's like, okay, how are we going to extract this thing, and knowing the conditions that you just spoke of it's not soft, light, fluffy Colorado sugar powder.
This is compressed
Sierra
concrete.
cement that you need a pickaxe to dig through. Good luck with a shovel. So what was going through your mind? I got to imagine there's some process of like, strategy to like, how are we going to even get to this to begin to extract it?
So the biggest problem, the biggest challenge was, and anybody that's snow wheeled and especially Sierra snow wheeled will know that from one trip to the next, from one day to the next,
part day, halfway through the day,
morning to afternoon.
Yeah, completely different. So we didn't know. Now we knew who the Jeep was. We didn't know what equipment we were going to be able to get to it, right? So we figured the ATVs are going to be able to get there because we've already been there, and we've been there through all the ups and downs of that winter: rain, snow, sun. Not much sun, mostly rain and snow. But we figured the quads are going to be able to get there no matter what. So what can we do? You know, we can each carry a passenger. We can carry tools. We can get come-alongs. You know, we both have winches, but we're talking, 2,000 to 3,000 pound winches, right? I mean, that's not going to do the job.
ATVs,
so what else are we going to be able to do? That was the first time I'd learned about that. You guys have seen the flip-flop winch when you tie the two logs together and you wrap the rope around it. And then by just lifting that one lever over back and forth, you can wind a rope. So we're going into all this stuff, trying to figure out what it is that we're going to do. We're heavily invested at this point, and all we want to do is get that thing out, right? So luckily for us, he had sent me the picture midweek, and by this point, I mean, we've gathered attention already, and there are lots of people that are chomping at the bit that want to be a part of it, right? So we put together a pretty awesome crew. A few guys, I think almost everybody that was there, I still keep tabs with, on Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And some of them are lifelong friends too. Scott Bruns is one to this day, really good buddy of mine. He does a lot of desert racing and ultra four racing as well, with Adrac racing. So see him at Hammers all the time. Yep. And Chris Hicks, I believe, is the car owner. So really good friends with Scott, and I've met Chris and been at races with him and hanging out and all that kind of stuff. So Scott is Chris's crew chief.
Oh, okay.
So he got involved, the Wardlow father and son team, Tim and Matt, and they're somewhere, I believe, like Placerville, longtime Rubicon snow wheelers. They got involved in it, and so that famous picture that everybody has seen that I took the day that we dug that Jeep out. So we were able to get Jeeps there that weekend. That day was April 29th of 2017.
Wow.
Because the Jeeps and everything was able to get there, we had lots of people. We probably had eight or 9 or 10 folks, right? People, maybe a wife or girlfriend. It was a big group, and the snow was right. By this point, Doug and I have a really good trail worked out, and we've shoveled down a lot of these nasty. We're not bringing Jeeps over many snow bridges, but if there were bigger spots, then we'd shoveled down and made the transitions a little easier.
Tank traps.
Yeah, so we got probably I'm going to say it was probably like 5 Jeeps plus the 2 ATVs got in on April 29th, and that's the day we uncovered it, and I took that picture.
Cool.
Wow.
And then you winched it out.
But that's not the day it came out.
That's not the day it came out, though. No.
No.
There's still
Absolutely
more.
not.
Wait, there's more.
Absolutely not.
Act now. You get a Ginsu knife set.
Yep. So it was, so let's see. So we all took some shifts and did a lot of digging. We probably were able to shovel 3 or 4 feet of snow off the area. And then at that point, you couldn't do anything with a shovel. We had chainsaws because there were a lot of trees. There's always a lot of trees down right through the winter, snow and wind. So we had some good chainsaws in the group. And in particular, one still with like a 36-inch bar. We started cutting, like we were building an igloo and cutting ice blocks.
Oh, geez.
So we started cutting the snow into chunks and prying chunks out. We had to do that for the last 6 feet.
Wow. Oh, my gosh. Sierra Cement.
And so, so the Jeep is uncovered just as you see it in that picture, but pretty much around it is just completely impacted, with snow. So we dug. It's pointing out, right? Because I was talking about earlier.
They were driving out
through that little icy creek crossing. It's facing the direction that we want to go.
Right.
So when I took that photograph, I'm facing east, and you're looking at Scott Bruns, Tim Wardlow, and Matt Wardlow. Those are the 3 Jeeps that are all in the photograph, right up on the rim. we dug the front of the Jeep out. It had an aftermarket bumper with 2 shackles like you see on every Jeep, right? And then we dug up underneath the front. We had the axle exposed. So I took a tree saver, put it around the front axle. The center Jeep in that picture is pulling off of a snatch block that was with an axle or a tree saver around the axle because
I'm looking at the picture right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had three Jeeps, 9,500 or 10,000 pound winches on every one of them. Each one was doubled. You can see if you zoom in on the photograph. So we had a snatch block on all 3 lines. So we doubled the pulling power.
And the Jeep is sitting in water, or is it frozen in underneath?
No snow.
Yeah, it's frozen in the snow.
But it wasn't that you broke through ice when they were driving back and forth that day when they originally got stuck.
So that's a good time for me to drop this little morsel in. So the day that we uncovered the Jeep, the windshield was completely broken and, just scattered. So we kicked it out. When we first got inside of it, there was water in the cup holders. So while that Jeep had been completely buried in the snow and then we got all that rain, that little creek had moved water. Water will flow through.
Oh my gosh.
No problem. When we pulled the dipstick on the engine, the 6 quarts of oil was in there, but it was on top of probably 10 or 12 quarts of water that was sitting in the bottom.
Geez.
So you saw the oil on the dipstick and then you had clean dipstick below it.
Oh my gosh.
Oil and water definitely do not mix.
Yes. So there was no starting or trying to run the Jeep. We just figured, hey, we're going to throw everything we have at it. Let's take the 3 rigs with the 3 strongest winches. Let's double all of them up and let's all attach to a different point so that we don't have a recovery point failure.
Sure.
So let's distribute the load as much as we can, put them all on there. And then where I was standing taking that picture, right, every Jeep operator is looking right at me. And so we directed that recovery, and after pulling on it for, I don't know, probably a minute, we called it off because
really
it was not, the Jeep was not moving at all. The bumper probably would have come off.
Yeah.
But
Jeez.
Yeah.
You're talking the Cherokee, right? A unibody.
Right.
So
yeah.
Sure.
Nothing is attached that well anyway.
Soulless.
Yes.
Right. Crazy. So,
oh my god, and the angle that you're pulling at too, I mean, the Jeeps are like 6 feet above the rig plus?
Yeah, that's probably right. I think we were saying earlier we thought that it was somewhere between 6 and 8 feet down.
Yeah.
And they may have actually, been sitting on spoils because we had pulled so much damn snow out of that hole, you can only move it so far. So yeah, it was a steep angle, and that's what we kind of figured, right? Like if the front end is just going to pop just a hair,
pop up, release the pressure,
absolutely.
So
then we certainly have the pulling power.
It didn't budge.
The Jeep did not move at all, not at all.
Christ. Wow.
Yep.
So obviously you failed that day, and then you guys pulled the ripcord and headed back out, licked your wounds, and then made another plan to come back in.
Yeah, and since, most folks working or whatever had a normal, like, we're available next weekend type of schedule, that was the plan that we left with that day. We were going to reconvene the following Saturday or whatever and try again.
And were you successful? Obviously you were successful at some point, but I mean, what was the next go?
Yeah, so we had a pretty decent week with some sun.
Okay.
And anybody that's lived in snow country knows now that we've exposed this thing to the air and the sun is able to hit the Jeep, it started melting everything back.
Yeah.
It also started melting all the other snow, all the snow bridges, all of the places where we had dug the transitions into those tank traps blew out, right? Sure. I mean, the water now is running and they all turned back into tank traps again, square edge tank trap holes. We reconvened the following weekend. No tired Jeep could get hardly out of the staging area.
Wow.
Absolutely not. No access for a
Jeep.
So that failed. And then we made a plan to go back with the 4-wheelers. So once the Jeep was located, dug out, the third attempt then was the 2 ATVs, the owner on his, I brought a good buddy of mine, Greg Rossi, who's still a good friend. He lives actually right down the way from Jason Berry.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And he's an engineer and a Jeep guy and just really cool dude and always down to help and lend a hand. So he rode in with me. We knew about the mechanical issues, about the water in the engine. The other mechanical issues as far as the Jeep was concerned, we knew we had to get it running because we were only going to be able to get the ATVs back. And the ATVs and their winches were not going to be strong enough to straight pull a dead Jeep out of the hole. So we brought oil. The vehicle had a roll cage in it, which is good because if it didn't, it would have been a pancake.
Oh, yeah.
That thing saw forces that, we can't even imagine. Each door jamb at the very top was metal to metal. And at the bottom of each door jamb, right, it was I think it's a 2-door Cherokee, but at the bottom of each door jamb, from the jamb to the door was like an inch. And at the top, they were touching.
To give another description about the power of the weight of snow, I mean, we've gone up to Meadow Lake in the summer, and after a big winter, the picnic tables have been slammed down into the ground. Where the bench part of the picnic table is flush with the ground, and we have to dig the picnic table back out of the ground.
We've had to winch a few out. Yeah,
I mean, that's crazy.
Right. Okay, so we talked about the unibody thing, right?
Yep.
And we talked about that when that got stuck, it was stuck on broken pieces of ice. So it had a very sturdy, high-centered foundation. And then the chassis got loaded with snow. The body was pushed down around the drivetrain of the Jeep to the point, Cherokees, at least that vintage, they have one electric and one mechanical cooling fan. The radiator is short, but it's wide. So they have 2 different fans on it. So the mechanical fan... Let's see if that's right. The mechanical fan was touching the radiator. The chassis had gotten pushed down and the drivetrain didn't move to the point where, the radiator and the fan were hitting. So we had to pull that off. A fuel line somewhere underneath had gotten pinched because there was hardly any fuel making it out of the fuel route. And then the engine was full of water. So Greg and I were able to dig out underneath, and we brought one of those real nice oil change pans, slid that underneath. I think because at that point we didn't know if the Jeep was going to be a total loss. So we were able to pull the drain plug, watch the water come out into our pan.
Gosh.
And once it changed from water to oil, then we just put the plug back in.
Sure. There you go. Hey, we got oil now.
Yes.
Oh
so we didn't do an oil change. We just took the 12 quarts of water out from beneath the oil that was already in the engine. I mean, it sat there for 6 months, so it was very well separated. And then the windshield was already gone. We had talked about that earlier. We kicked that out. So we dropped a 5-gallon, like a jazz jug in the passenger seat buckled that in, and then ran a fuel pump zip tied to the roll cage and a supplemental fuel line to the fuel rail that came out of the windshield.
Wow.
Did all that, got it running.
It fired.
Yeah, I mean, we brought a battery and jumper cable.
Sure. That's the 6-cylinder, the 4-liter?
4-liter.
Goddamn,
boy, that would have been a hell of a Die Hard commercial if the original battery still started it, right? You get 6 months under snow, and boom, fired right up.
Yeah, baby.
The little Energizer bunny comes running out from under the hood.
No, that says a lot about that 4-liter.
I think it was a squirrel. I forgot to tell you that.
Yeah, probably. Bird's nest.
The day that we dug it out, I'm pretty sure it was a squirrel. Something had made its home in that Cherokee over the wintertime. So it had burrowed down through the snow, got in through a window, and was living. So the very first guy, I think his name was Kenny, that was at the bottom of the hole when we saw the windshield and kicked it out. He's like, "There's something in here." It was like a movie. Like, what is it?
It's an alien.
It's all dark,
That's funny.
Man.
Nice.
Yeah. So get the thing running. It's in the hole. We had a bubber rope, one of the kinetic straps, right? Mm-hmm. They were one of the first folks that had those. And so we tied the 2 tracked wheelers together, and then we used a kinetic rope from the 2-track quads, hooked that to the Cherokee. Greg got in the Cherokee, which was now running, put it in 4-low. We built a full ramp of plastic recovery boards that lots of people like to talk bad about, but let me tell you, I used the shit out of those things.
Wow.
And
I've made
snow
believers
and mud
out of people.
And sand, they're usable. But not on the Rubicon.
Not on rocks.
For, like when there's no snow.
Unless it's
You're
April.
rock crawling.
Well, let's see. Now we're talking May 2nd of 2017.
Right.
Then they might be usable on the Rubicon.
We just saw somebody in a Gladiator use them rock crawling on the Rubicon with no snow in sight. So, no.
Yeah.
They have their place in soft sand, snow, mud. I get it. I'm okay with traction boards in, but when you're you don't see any rock buggies driving around with traction boards.
No.
Totally.
So did you just drive it out?
All right, so you got the traction boards out.
Traction boards made a full.
The rig's running, and you drop it into 4 low, first gear, and just freaking hammer down.
Yeah, I hit that thing like I've never. I mean, the quads are CBT like a snowmobile, right? They've got a belt. But they both have low range.
Clutch. Yeah.
Yep. So we're both in low range. The owner had a Yamaha Grizzly, which it's comparable to mine, but it's got a selectable diff lock. You slide a little switch and it pops out. You can lock it, fully into diff lock. I used my, wife's hair tie, slid that on the lever, hammered that thing. Both quads, same time. We're looking at each other, synchronizing, and just hit it as hard as we could hit it. And the Cherokee came out of the hole that day.
Wow. First time. Well, first attempt
time
there.
It was the first time we hit it with the 2 quads and the tracks and the kinetic strap.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Wow.
And then
everybody was just cheering. I could only imagine. It's like,
oh yeah,
crap,
we have video.
Worked.
We have a video of that. Yep. And
you do have video of it, huh?
I'll probably repost it. So we'll sync up when the podcast airs, and then everyone listens, and then I'll put all that stuff up.
No, we'll definitely
that'd be cool.
Post. I'll need those. Yeah, I'll post those up when I create the webpage for this episode.
Perfect.
So,
there you
very
go.
Cool.
So so it came out of the hole that day, but it didn't come off the trail.
Right.
We were only able to get it. So I think we had talked earlier. We're probably 4.5 miles west of the Tahoe staging area. We were able to get it about 2 miles. And then we ran into, all those same issues that kept the Jeeps from coming in that day. Every time, if you're familiar with that trail in the wintertime, I mean, the trail itself is just such a shit show. There's so much water. It just really gets difficult. However, you've got 3 lakes that you drive by on the way in: Miller Lake, Lily Lake, and McKinney. McKinney, you don't drive next to. You see it, from the shelf road, kind of down below. That's McKinney. Lily's in the middle, and Miller. So we were battling. That trail was so nasty. When we'd go in on the track quads, we would run over the frozen lakes, right? Because we'd make great time, and we weren't worried about anything.
That's the great thing. I explain to people that, you do these trails in the summertime, and you're on the trail. You tread lightly, you're on the trail, right? Right. But in the wintertime, when you're over snow and 14 feet of snow, whatever it may be, it's like, oh, I want to go over here. And the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. You can go that way in the winter because you're on top of the snow pack. And it's such a different environment.
In fact, there's a separate designation, right? So the Jeeps, ATVs, dirt bikes, OHVs, right? Off-highway vehicles. So luckily for snowmobiles, you get the OSV designation, over snow vehicles. You're not touching the ground.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So OSVs have opportunities to recreate in areas.
The world is your oyster.
None of the other off-road guys ever get to do. And so that's a big responsibility.
You're right. You're right.
You're able to access zones that no one else gets to touch.
But we need to state too that there are zones, because you can't just like free ball it across the countryside in Tahoe, especially. So there are zones. You need to know those zones and be educated when you go out there, because there are a lot of no-fly zones out there. And Mount Rose is a great example. You go up and you got to bang a hard left, and then you're off into some great country. But you go off to the right, that is non-over-the-snow terrain. So anyways, just want to point out that it is there are areas or zones that you can recreate in, and areas that are no-fly zones.
Absolutely. So as it relates here to the Glacier Girl story, so we got out of the hole and we got back past the rest of Miller Meadow, and then we came to the portion of trail that is adjacent to Miller Lake, which is the biggest of the 3. And I looked at the owner and I was like, man, if we try to go down the trail, where the proper trail is,
right,
we're not going to get anywhere.
Ain't happening.
I still have, so at this point, he's riding his ATV, I'm on mine, and we have the kinetic strap between just my ATV and the running Jeep that Greg does. So I'm helping it all the way. I mean, it's aired down. It doesn't have bead locks, has 35s. We're aired down as much as we thought we could get away with, probably 7 PSI, something like that. And people say, oh man, I've run lower. Well, let's go back to all those tank traps.
Exactly.
It's not just snow, right? We're on the snow and we're dropping off of cliffs into rocks and running water, and you can't have a blowout. You can't risk it. It's not worth it.
Right.
So so we're keeping it tied to my machine. I'm running as hard as I can and I'm pulling that thing everywhere. So we come to Miller Lake and we stop, and I look at the owner and I was like, hey, we've come across this, you and I now for the last 4 months. Every time we come in here, you can see the bad areas. I'm sure, Jason, you've snowmobiled over frozen water before. And if you've done it enough and if you've been in an area enough, shorelines are risky. Usually you can start to see the color, right?
Yep,
you can
the
tell,
color indicator, yes. It changes.
Whether something is safe or not.
Yes.
And so even here, we're into May now, right? Just barely, but
so
we're into May. Of
warm temperatures.
Yeah,
warmer.
And I just said, man, what do you want to do, right? It's your machine. Everybody knows it's your machine.
Sure.
They know it's out here. And he said, if you think that it'll make it, that's fine. Like, I'll go with your gut.
Put it back on your plate.
So I towed that. We never put those pictures online, but I towed that Jeep over Miller Lake.
Wow.
No kidding. How thick was your best guesstimate the ice was?
It was probably still, I mean, if you go off the chart that, the state of Wisconsin, don't you know, posts every fall, right? It's probably 10 or 12 inches, I would say, is what it takes.
So still significant. It wasn't like 4 inches of ice.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, to be fair, we never stopped and augured it for our fishing trip.
Just keep moving. Don't hesitate.
Don't stop. We're not going to stop.
I've been on lakes in the wintertime, and you see, it get very blue and then maybe a little moisture, and you're like, oh, get the F off this mofo, because it's
I have plenty of other Avalanche stories like that.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother podcast right there.
Yeah. So we towed it over Miller Lake, and then we got back on the trail. We got to the next spot that was really tough, but it was safe, right? It was hard to proceed down the trail, but there was plenty of places off to the side where we could park it, and it wasn't going to inhibit any other user, snowmobile or whatever. So we parked it. We got the crew back together the next weekend. Conditions were right.
Wow.
And we were able to get in and get it out, and all the way out.
Right on. Well, that's super cool.
That had to be so from very start of the mission where it took you 3-4 times to even find it or like get a locale on it, to when it actually got off the trail. What was that time frame now? How many months?
Yeah.
Or days?
So you're talking I mean,
early,
more or less from the first time they had tried until I got involved. We did all the trips, and it actually came out. It was a solid 4.5 to 5 months.
Yeah.
Just out sitting on the Rubicon Trail.
What is that Jeep still around, or did it get towed?
Yeah, where is that Jeep today?
Yeah, so it was not declared a total loss.
Wow.
Okay.
It was retained by the family, and as far as I know, they still own it.
Okay.
I think the son now, he's graduated college and he's into all sorts of other stuff. So I don't think he drives it every day, but I think it's still around.
Wow.
And I know the truck is still around.
It needs to be like a fixture on the Rubicon, maybe in Rubicon Springs or something, or a Cadillac, so like the old Cadillac Hill, this could be like XJ freaking Glacier Girl, it's such an iconic thing now that we're going to be talking about, years from now. I remember when
Glacier Girl Meadow,
like Chris
right?
It's so funny, man. The people like from all sorts of, all different walks of life, because there's a lot of folks that don't listen to this podcast and that are not into off-road stuff, but they watch the news every morning.
Sure.
And this story that picture that I took wound up making it on the Sacramento News, the Reno News. It was pretty cool.
Right on.
So what kind of feedback did you hear, good, bad, or indifferent, from people of like, oh, that's awesome. You guys recovered it, to people like, oh, you're a freaking idiot. We could have got that out that weekend. I got this badass K5 Blazer that would have gone in there and got it right away, with a 454 big block. So what were some of the highlights of those comments that you got? So, because I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the most common and most legitimate, number one thing that I actually took the time to respond to was, why didn't you just wait?
Yeah. Wait till July 4th.
Right.
Light it off with some bottle rockets.
Right.
With a rocket.
Anybody that lives where you guys live or lives where I live or anywhere in between, they know that Lake Tahoe is a really special place.
Yeah.
And every drop of water that comes out of these mountains that is in the Tahoe watershed is monitored, sacred. And we have all sorts of sacred, all sorts of regulations involved, right? We have a whole federal agency, Tahoe Regional Planning Agency,
TRPA, baby.
Puts they put restrictions
Keep
on
Tahoe
everything,
blue,
irrigation, all that kind of stuff, right? Yep. So this thing was in a watershed, and the owner, stand-up guy, awesome dude. He was in touch with the Forest Service the whole time. Okay. They knew the deal. Their preference was, as soon as that thing can come out, the better.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah. Sure.
That's number one. Number two is, as we know, the Rubicon is a county road. It's open year round. And it doesn't matter if it's somebody in their Barbie Jeep or somebody on a snowmobile. If you want to try it, you can do it whenever you want to, all year round. So it was in the middle of the trail, and we figured the last thing we want is to have somebody that's ripping through on a snowmobile after a warm week and hits that thing and comes off.
Sure.
If we try and do this, it's going to be a great challenge. It's going to be a great story. And odds are, like, something like that's not going to happen. By the time it would ever get exposed, we're going to have it out. Yeah. And that's the way that it went. I mean, it was a risk, to nobody until the day that we got it out.
Sure.
We had flagging that was up.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because I think to this day, if you know where to look, there's a spot on the trail where you can see like a little piece of marking tape from the day that the owner found it. And it is way up in a tree. In this one
really?
Little spot.
He marked it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so now it's like, you'd need an extension ladder on the trail to be able to get it. But,
sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's super cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that was the, like I say, that was the number one. And it seems reasonable, right? And,
sure.
To a lot of people, if it was just sitting out in a random place in the woods, that happens, right? A lot of people, even snowmobiles, happens all the time. They just leave them. And, but if we could get it out, it was in a watershed and it was on the trail. It was right in the middle of the trail. Obviously we had the means eventually. So it was worthwhile for us to go ahead and get it. I don't remember any particular stories about, so-and-so saying that they had such a machine. I think a snowcat with a blade would have been able to go in real early, like the weekend after. It would have been a ton of work and it would have cost a ton of money because they'd be cutting into all of those and out of all those tank traps.
Sure.
But I think that would have been an option early on. And knowing what I know now and that setup with those tracks from Ruby Tracks and some of the different equipment that I have, I think we could have had it out probably on the front end, one of those early breaks in the winter.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was you just led right into one of my questions, was like, knowing what 5 years later, what would you do differently? And so just technology of the tracks and what? I mean,
so when this happened, I wasn't even advertising. I had just started Avalanche, that at that time was the consulting, construction business.
Okay.
So I had like a full-time client in town, acted as his project manager, but I never even thought to tie it together to doing recoveries or anything. At the time that this event happened, this was kind of the start of all of it.
Wow. Got it.
Okay. It
became such a big, publicized, difficult deal that it kind of gave me the idea, like, hey, there may be something to this, and so at that point, then I took it that direction and then started investing more heavily in all of that equipment. So I went from having the one simple Kawasaki ATV where I would go and get a snowmobile every once in a while. So now I have the 4Runner set up with the tracks. I also have a Can-Am 1000 that Outlander they make in a liter quad. So it's 1,000 cc, 90 horsepower ATV. Can-Am with all their Ski-Doo experience, they make a snow specific track.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So it's similar to what I use on the Kawasaki, but it is snow only. High facts like a snowmobile, right? Which is just a plastic,
Sure.
a UHMW slide that needs to be lubricated by snow.
Gotta have snow.
Yeah, and then it's 2-inch paddles. So you can load it in your truck and drive across your driveway, but you wouldn't want to go down, a dirt road, or you'd chew that thing up in no time.
Yeah.
However, when conditions are tough, and when I've had to go in and get snowmobiles and snow bikes in the big snowmobiling areas, like off of Little Truckee Summit up into the mountains
Meadow Lake
there.
area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm talking the country where it's real snowmobile country. That machine is the one that you want because it is an animal in the snow.
So with all the experience and the growth of your business, and obviously wintertime seems to be your bread and butter, what is
Sure.
how do you do this? By the hour, by the job? How do you bill?
Yeah, so each machine basically has an hourly rate, and then I have a travel rate. And I think it's, at the end of the day, I'm still passionate about it. I love to do it, and I love to help people out. So I think it's still a bargain. And I think if you read my reviews, everybody feels the same way. People that I work with are just, first of all, they're seeing stuff that they've never seen anywhere else most of the time.
Right.
Equipment that they have no exposure to. And the whole thing just becomes a fun adventure,
Right.
This last December, we had a record-breaking Sierra Snowfall December.
Right.
It was all right and around Christmas. And I had a couple recoveries that came to be just because there was nobody else. I mean, anybody involved in snow business in Tahoe this December was absolutely booked. It doesn't matter if you were a snow plow person, you were just a normal
You were buried.
tow truck
Literally.
driver. Everybody had so much work. And there was a guy that had pulled in, it might have been on Christmas Day, with his wife to a snow park, South Lake Tahoe, out by Camp Rich, somewhere around Taylor Creek. There's a small snow park, and not for snowmobiles, just like hiking, snowshoeing, things like that. He pulled in, I think, on Christmas Day. So you're already going to be down on services, plows, etc. Parked, two-wheel drive SUV with chains, parked, spent 2 hours out, and when they got back to the vehicle, it was to the hood. Yeah.
Jesus.
And then they called an Uber. It was very close. I'm going to say 300 yards from Highway 89. Called an Uber, went into town, got a hotel room. Called an Uber in the morning, went back out, and they didn't even know where the Pathfinder was.
It was
completely buried. Yeah.
It was Glacier Girl Part 2.
Yeah. See, but yeah, so luckily for him, he was a lot closer to the highway.
Yeah.
I had family in town. I mean, it was Christmas,
Sure.
and I was just monitoring because, again, you've got all these volunteer full drive groups. Everybody saying, "Oh man, yeah, I'll drive up there. I live an hour
Sure.
from Tahoe," and it all failed. Nothing happened. Someone said, "Well, dude, why don't you wait? Why don't you get the talk to the county? They're going to plow it eventually. It's a snow park,
Sure.
right? Like that's what they do." And they said, "Yeah, cool. We'll probably plow that in March."
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, at that time, everybody had been working 24 hours a day. Any private snow contractor was just exhausted. I mean, these people hadn't slept. I mean, the guy had no options. And so the last family member was my dad. He was in town, and I ran him to the airport. And on the drive to the airport, I sent the guy a message. I was like, "Hey, just so you know, I've probably got time to get this done. But it's, I gave him a price. I said, it's probably going to be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But I can do it
It's
for you."
holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, "That sounds great." Right. Because I'm
man.
paying, he had been staying in Reno. So his hotel wasn't even in Tahoe.
Hotel room.
And he had left Reno in his car and got stuck in Tahoe. So the Reno, he was still checked in. He still had crap in a room in Reno. So he's paying for a room in Reno. He was paying for the room that he and his wife were staying in Tahoe. And sure, maybe he could have waited 7 days, but all of a sudden, I think they were getting him $300 a night in Tahoe, plus the Reno room, plus Ubering, missing work.
Oh my God.
It's not
Yeah.
worth it, right?
Yeah.
So
No, at some
he
point.
was thrilled. I mean, I brought snowshoes, I brought an ATV with tracks, and I broke the trail and basically groomed a path all the way up to where he was. the 4Runner to get him out. I didn't have the tracks for the 4Runner at this time.
Okay.
So actually, Jay Barry, I gave him a call. I'm like, hey man, I don't know what you're doing, but if you're free, would you go to my house, park your truck, get in my 4Runner, and drive over here? Because I'm on the quad. I've got the trail all groomed.
I talked to him about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I need to hook them both together to get out of here. Yeah. And he said, I'll do it, but I'll bring my truck if you want. And I was like, hey man, if you want to do that to your truck, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you no, right? You could drive my 4Runner, or you could drive your truck. It's up to you. So he brought his truck, and we got the job done with the truck, and that was great. But I think his truck weighs twice as much as my 4Runner does, because at the end of the day, he's still an Overlander.
Yeah, that's right.
He's an Overlander. Yeah, there you go. You got the Overlander.
Have his sirens and shit,
Overlander and golf cart driver.
So I actually had to pull Jason. Jason got stuck on the way in to hook up to the Pathfinder.
Okay.
So I had to pull him out with my quad to get him up to the spot where they were, turn everything around, and then we hooked the quad to his truck, both to the Pathfinder to drag it out.
Wow.
Oh, gosh. And then that was when holiday was over and people were trying to get out of Dodge, and the freeways were like packed too. So you had to negotiate that BS as well. The highways were just, all the roads were clogged.
Yeah, so I'm Nevada side, right? So I'm southeast corner of the lake, and where this was southwest corner.
Right.
And so even if I could have, as one man, operated both machines just to get back to get the other one, would have taken hours. I think poor Jason waited. I think it was an hour or something to do a drive that would normally take 15 minutes or something.
We were talking, and he was just like, you can't even believe. I mean, I'm not even going to say what he was saying because we are an explicit podcast, but not that explicit. Yeah,
not
so
Sailor
it was insane, right?
Oh man!
But I mean, there's so many freaking stories, and that's so cool. So, Glacier Girl was a success, and that is, so you heard it here. These are the facts of what actually happened, and that's cool. You're still in contact with everybody part of that recovery, and obviously the owner, and that's wow, quite.
Yeah,
you learned a lot from
those...
that. That's totally. Helps you out every time you do a recovery or anything. It helps, with the next recovery. You're like, I know this works, or I know, this setup can do this leverage, whatever it is.
Well, I like to tell people all the time, and I think that was probably because there were so many different tools and vehicles that were involved. So back when I was in college, engineering school at Colorado State, I loved physics, right? Mm-hmm. And anybody that's ever been in a physics class, you always get these hypothetical physics problems where you have an object or a point in the middle, and then you have all these forces that act on it in all these different ways, right? And in my life, the most real experience that you can ever get that relates to a physics problem like that is doing an off-road recovery. Yeah. Because you have the point in the middle, and you're able to do all these different things to act on that point. And when it's in a textbook, it's fun and it's challenging, but it doesn't mean anything, and no one can relate that to the real world.
Sure.
But you get involved in a big off-road recovery, and that's exactly
real
right.
Real world
vectors.
Yeah, real world experience. And fine. Book smarts are great, and okay, I know about this physics and all that stuff, and that's great. But when you get out there in the real world, and you're like, okay, we're going to hook up to this tree and snatch block off that and everything. I mean, it's just each recovery is unique.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
You've got conditions, okay, like you're talking snow and Glacier Girl and buried. Okay, that's like crazy extreme. But a normal off-road recovery, it's hopefully not a rollover, but there's rollovers, right. And it's dirt or mud or sand or whatever it may be, where this vehicle is momentarily disabled from moving forward.
Or backward.
But yeah, so And then is the vehicle a Suzuki Samurai that weighs 2,000 pounds, or is it a frickin',
JL
Dodge
weighs 6,000
freaking
pounds.
POS that's stuck on the side of the trail that's going to take 16 frickin' rigs to get it off the trail? So, anyways, it's cool, and I mean, we could share some war stories, but it's so cool the insight, and This is great stories, and it's gone long here, but we need to do a part 2, Nick, of off-road recovery basics and things that you've seen that worked, didn't work, to do, not to do, safety, all that stuff. I mean, that could be a whole nother freaking podcast right there.
Sure.
That I'd love to get into.
But I think there's stories, that we could use as an example, because like you say, there's not many that relate to the story that we just told as far as Glacier Girl is concerned. But there's a whole bunch more, and each one, has a lesson or a tool or something that made the difference and made it safe, right?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? Because, I mean, it's like, okay, in that Glacier Girl, I mean, being widely publicized like that, I mean, there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong there, and that could have turned into the Donner Party several times, I'm sure. Right? Because that environment, and it's all fun and games, and let's get this thing out of here. But safety is number one, and nobody getting hurt or worse. So one of I got to say this before the end of the podcast. You're a self-proclaimed, I hope I pronounced this right, cinephile, right? Lover of snow?
Yes, absolutely. Kinophile, maybe?
Yeah, cinephile. It's Chinopphile. Cinephile. Yes, I am too. I love it. I wish I lived up there. I want to live up there in the snow, but snow country. But it's such a cool yin and yang of summer on the rocks, granite, to winter, 14 feet of snow above the rocks that you're traveling across, and your orientation, right? Where you're at. You're like Little Truckee Summit's a great, Meadow Lake area is a great example, because Fordyce Creek Trail, my favorite trail up there, and that country gets buried, absolutely effing buried. There's still snow up there right now as we speak, and this is, in July. We're 4th of July weekend right now, and there's still snow patches up there, and it's a whole different environment, and you're trying to orientate yourself, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, I know that mountain's, Old Man Mountain, and I know this is Signal Peak and stuff, so you can orientate that, but the physical terrain that you're driving over, it's like, I drove over Windshield 5, 4, 3 in my snowmobile, and it was hard to recognize. I mean, it's just, and the only way I knew it is because of GPS.
That happens on the Rubicon too, man.
Rubicon, same thing. Right?
When you get up 12 or 14 feet above the trail surface, and all of the branches that are cut out or have been knocked off or winched off or whatever are buried. And so you're up in the canopies of the trees, which are untouched, and it gets really hard to follow the trail. We had to use every time until we had established track. You know what I mean? You can get way out of touch. It's incredible how far off track you can get.
It is, and thank God for modern technology of GPS and how accurate it's or allowing us that accuracy from the government now that we can get a little bit more pinpointed, and then technology again with the inReach. I'm glad to hear you say that. I've heard that over and over again, and you've got real world experience with that. For it's nice to get out off the grid. That's why we all go out there and want to check out, but if shit hits the fan, you need to be able to get help right away, and that's a great option.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is to be continued. I love this. This is part 1 of maybe 2 or 3. Yeah. I don't know. We're going to see where this goes, Nick.
Sure.
I appreciate your insight and your experience, your worldly experience. I didn't know you traveled that much. I learned something new every time I talk to you. So, and again, met you, at King of the Hammers and through Randy being the crew chief and everything, and you helped us get the Randy Slauson interview.
Yeah.
So we're very appreciative of that. And Randy's become a friend of the podcast now, which is super cool. And love it, man. We got more to cover. But
we certainly do.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
We certainly do.
Lorenzo's giving us the wrap-up sign here. We're pushing 2 hours, I guess. Holy smokes.
Nick, how do people get a hold of you? What's your Instagram?
What do you
on Facebook? How do we reach you, or how do people follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Instagram is just at Avalanche Technical. It's fully spelled out, no spaces or punctuation, anything. Avalanche Technical. My website is the same, avalanchetechnical.com. Phone numbers on there, emails on there. Be happy to, bail somebody out if need be at some point, or just chat about recovery gear. I wind up making friends. Almost every client I have, right, I keep in touch with, and I've helped lots of people get set up and get gear put together. That's a good segue into just saying that a few sponsors, folks that help me out doing what I do. Factor 55 is a huge one. Justin has. I
was going to say, Justin, right?
Absolutely. He's found this niche in the off-road world. Totally. But the coolest thing is, you come out of industry or the design world, and it's the classic battle of form versus function, right? Something that's going to work or something that's going to look pretty. And he's hit the nail on the head of finding a way to have products that are beautiful and that work phenomenally well. Built in the U.S. I mean, what's not to love? Fantastic
Exactly.
stuff.
America, especially 4th of July weekend here. America.
Hell yeah. Yep.
Dude, so that gives me another idea for a podcast, because I talked to Justin at KOH, and he came up with the hammer loop, right? And I go, dude, he's a character. Got to get him on the podcast. It would be great to have you and him on there and just talk about all that stuff. Okay, so now we're 4 podcasts.
Lorenzo, make that happen.
Just add you to the,
Oh, man. Hell
okay,
yeah.
who else helps you out?
Yeah, so I mentioned Ruby Tracks earlier.
Yep.
They're on Instagram, RUBI Tracks, TRACKS. So Scott Profit, the owner of Ruby Tracks, great guy, hooked me up, has a phenomenal product. I think personally that he's the best at what he does. So anybody out there that maybe wants to do some overland jeeping in the wintertime and some real snow, check him out. He has a great product, does a really good job. So Ruby Tracks, Randy at Bomber has been huge. It's the worst paying job I've ever had, but hanging out with Randy has been phenomenal. He's a great guy, and I love racing with him, and running the pits with him has been great. And there's all kinds of stuff, being in this industry that we trade favors back and forth all the time, and it's fantastic. So very good friend, and a lot of the things that I've done and continue to do, I couldn't do without knowing him and being a buddy. So,
right on.
Those connections. I mean, that's what's so cool about the off-road industry or sport hobby, whatever you want to call it. Is just everybody's so freaking cool and down to earth. Even though there's a lot of people that could have that all that in a bag of chips attitude, like Randy absolutely could, 3-time king. But and you get to know him, and he is one of the coolest freaking cats out there. That just he produces a great product at Bomber Fab, and he can freaking race it, and he can fix it. So I mean, he's the trifecta there, and but yet he's willing to talk to anybody and share his knowledge, and super cool. So,
a dying breed for sure. But man, wheeling, hanging out and racing with him for the last 5 or 6 years has just been an absolute honor, and it's good to help him get his story told.
Exactly, and that's it. And he's not one to go out there and like, again, that all that in a bag of chips attitude he doesn't have. He's the opposite. He's like, well, I just do what I do, And go back to the stock mobbing comment, where he's out there in this Toyota freaking pickup going on these crazy trails and exploring and stuff. And, him and Amber and it's cool. It's just, it's fun to talk with them and follow their story and see what adventure they're off to next. So, and hopefully I can get my F-150 and stock mob with them here soon when I get out to Nevada. So, anyways, we'll see how that all works out.
Right.
Well, that sounds good. Last thing I'm going to mention really quick is Koenig USA tire chains. Obviously, I'm out in the winter a lot of time.
Yeah.
And they make a phenomenal product. And, you can pick up chains as an afterthought on your way to Tahoe or anywhere else, going up in the mountains. But if you really want to have something nice that works really well, Koenig, Konig, makes an awesome product. And so they've got me covered. Unfortunately, in California, if I pull a trailer, I've got to have chains on my truck, even though the tires are severe winter rated and it's full-wheel drive. So they really help me out there. Koenig, and they're on Instagram as well. They keep a pretty active thing. Last but not least, GBC Tire. That's a new one. But they've got power sports for ATVs and UTVs. They have some awesome tires. I've raced on them before in the desert. And then they have a light truck line as well. So I've got a new set of tires for my truck from them. Looking forward to put them through their paces this winter. So we got connected recently, but they thought that it would be nice doing everything that I do to really give them some feedback on their product. They're really into the industry and power sports and everything that we do, and really want to have the best product out there. So,
right on! Congrats on that. Yeah, you'll put them to the test and you'll give it an honest review. That's
Heck
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow,
that's it, man.
That's it.
Very cool, man. Well, this has been great. Unfortunately, we're remote. I wish we were up in Tahoe there, drinking some bourbon together, and
we'll do it. We got an
I guess there's no fireworks right now, but you're going to have a drone show or something coming up.
South Lake is doing it.
South Lake is
they are doing a fireworks?
Yeah.
North Shore is doing the drone.
There we go. The casinos are making it. Okay.
Yeah, North Shore and Incline is doing the drone thing. But, one of the best we talked about earlier, all over the country, unfortunately, sometimes on 4th of July, South Lake. Not that we need anybody else coming during the 4th of July.
Right.
They do a phenomenal job.
Sitting on the beach in Marlow Bay watching the fireworks. That used to be my thing.
There you go.
Blast, so.
Well, you're gonna have to put it on Instagram Live or something. That's the only way I'm going to see it this year. I'm going to be in San Jose, painting my house. So, real exciting stuff here in my world. But anyways. Man, Nick, thank you so much. This has been fun. We could, like I say, there's so much to cover. This is going to be several parts to this podcast, and what a great story. And stay tuned for some recovery tips and tidbits from Nick here in the future. I'm looking forward to that.
That's the tip awesome. From Nick.
So. Just a tip from Nick. There you go. There you go,
all
Chris.
Right, part 2 coming in hot.
Look at it. Coming in hot.
All right, Nick, thanks for being on the show, and definitely we will follow up.
Right on,
sounds
man.
Great.
If you want to get a hold of Jason or Chris, remember our emails are Jason or Chris at wheelingwinewhiskey.com. Don't forget about Lorenzo. He's also Lorenzo at wheelingwinewhiskey.com. You can also catch Jason. He's the one that controls the Instagram as Wheeling Wine and Whiskey. And don't ever forget about our phone number. I know that we're going to have to wrap up a contest here pretty quick about.
It's already wrapped up.
It's right. It's the end of the month has happened. But our phone number.
Yeah, the Gear Wrench Corey random. What do I want to call this? The ransom hotline.
Ransom hotline. That's right.
What that
for
was.
The Allen wrenches. That's right.
Blackmail hotline. I'll just call it what it is. It's a blackmail hotline.
So the phone number, that number is 408-800-5169. If you want to call and leave a voice message, and we'll play it on the show. Again, 408-800-5169. And Jason, you got anything else?
I don't, man. This has been a fun podcast. And thanks again, man. And with that,
we're out.